Hi everyone, it's Mark, and today I'll be taking you through the IELTS speaking test from top to bottom with practice time, sample answers, and suggestions for how you can improve your test score on test day. Now, before we get straight into it, I want to mention that if you're planning to take the IELTS soon, we have an added bonus. In the description of this video, we've added a checklist that you can download for free that will help you figure out if you're ready to take the IELTS speaking test. And if you're not ready, the checklist will tell you exactly what you need to do. I highly recommend it. So, your IELTS speaking test will be a one-on-one test with a real live examiner. It'll take 11 to 14 minutes, and it consists of 3 parts. There will be an unassessed identity check, followed by 4 to 5 minutes of small talk, just to get you warmed up. Next, you'll have a 2-minute long talk where you'll speak uninterrupted. Finally, you'll have 4 to 5 minutes of discussion. Okay, so on test day, make sure that you are early. Give yourself plenty of time to arrive and relax. Don't forget to bring your passport or other form of accepted ID. If you're doing the test at a test center, you will be asked to wait in a waiting room. Then the examiner will come and get you and take you to the testing room. The examiner may or may not say much to you during this time, so don't worry if they don't say very much. If you're doing the test from home or on your computer, you'll want to make sure that you are in a quiet room with good internet connection. Now, I really want to mention something about how you should approach answering questions in the IELTS tests. A lot of students get nervous or focused on answering the question correctly, as if there's a correct or perfect answer. There are no perfect answers. There are only ideas that are well developed and ideas that are poorly developed. A lot of times, students will try to answer questions quickly with yes, because, or no, because, and this isn't wrong, but often the ideas aren't well developed. In today's test, we'll show you some techniques for how to approach thinking about the questions and how to go about connecting and presenting your ideas. I hope you're excited. Let's get into it. We're going to start with a simulation of the identity check. The identity check only lasts about 30 or 40 seconds. It's ungraded. Don't give long answers. Keep it short. Ready? Hello, my name is Mark. Can you tell me your full name, please? And what shall I call you? And can you tell me where you're from? May I see your identification, please? Thank you, that's fine. Okay, we're now up to the first scored part of the test, small talk. In this part of the test, I'm going to ask you about 12 or so questions on 3 day-to-day topics. They should be simple and familiar questions. And you should only answer with 3 or 4 sentences. Don't overdo it. Ready? Let's talk about where you live. Do you live in a house or an apartment? What is your favorite room in your home? Who do you live with? What would you like to change about your home? Now, you're 1/3 of the way through the first part of the test. But before we go on to the next set of small talk questions, I want to show you how I might answer the questions on test day and give you an idea of how you can approach these questions. Here's the first question, and here's my response. I live in an apartment. I've been living there for about 6 years. It's a short train ride into the city. Here is the second question. And here's my response. I suppose it's my living room. It's got a large glass door that opens onto the balcony, which is great because the room stays bright all day. Notice here that I've used which is great because. This is a great way to not only extend my answer, but to use a wider range of grammar and vocabulary. Be sure to check out this video, 7 words to say in IELTS speaking to get a 7 or more. It has great tips on how you can extend your ideas and improve your grammar. Here's the third question. And here's my response. I live with my wife. I've had other roommates in the past. She's much easier to get along with. And here's the fourth question. And here's my response. I guess it would be nice to have more space. We're still in a 1-bedroom apartment, so it's pretty small. If we had another room, then it would be easier to manage our belongings. Hopefully we can find a bigger place that we like soon. Notice how I used the word if here. We have a whole video all about using the word if in IELTS speaking. I recommend you check it out if you haven't already. So my answers here were concise and relevant. Try doing the same. And as I mentioned, the examiner will now ask a few more questions on a different everyday topic. Ready? Let's talk about sports now. What sports are popular in your country? Do you play any sports? What sports did you enjoy when you were younger? Is it important for children to play sports? Okay, well done. Let me now show you how I would respond to those 4 questions. Here's the first question, and here's my response. Definitely hockey. Most people in my hometown watch it, especially during the playoffs. I remember once I was walking home after training and walking by some houses. I could see in almost every window people watching the game in their living rooms. The city is so quiet at this time because everyone is watching at home. Did you notice how I added stress to some of these words? Remember, pronunciation isn't just about whether you make the sound correctly. It's about how you emphasize or add nuance to your answer through stress and intonation. We actually have a video on our channel all about using sentence stress in the IELTS speaking test. I recommend checking it out if you want to quickly improve your speaking before test day. Here's the second question, and here's my response. I don't. Not since high school anyway, and not any team sports. Since I was in my mid-20s, I've trained in a few types of martial arts though. I'm not as keen on team sports. Notice here how I said no, but I mentioned that I do martial arts. Another way you could approach this question is to describe a team sport that you'd like to try, or one that you played when you were younger. You could even say that you don't do any sports and explain why you can't or why you don't like sports. Anything is possible. Try to respond like you would if your best friend asked you the question. Here's the third question. And here's my response. Well, my dad wanted me to become a professional tennis player, so I did play quite a bit of tennis. I did enjoy it, but I wasn't quite as passionate as he was. I haven't picked up a racket since high school. And here's the fourth question. And here's my response. It is. I think it's important for children to have this physical outlet and also to learn teamwork and discipline. I know that for some kids, sports can be quite intimidating, but I think engaging kids in some kind of physical activity really helps them to learn to persevere, which is important, particularly as they get older. Notice in this response, I talked about the specific benefits of sports and then described the effect it has later. Effect or benefit are great ways to extend your ideas and justify your positions. Also note how I added which is important at the end as well. So as you saw in my second set of answers, I'm beginning to extend and justify my answers a little bit more, and I'm using a range of different grammar and sentence structures to express myself. We're now going to do the third and final set of questions for part 1 of the speaking test. You ready? Let's talk about clothes. What kind of clothes do you like to wear? Where do you usually buy your clothes? When do people wear traditional clothes in your country? Do you think young people or older people are more interested in clothes? Okay, well done. Let me show you how I would respond to those last 4 questions. Here's the first question. And here's my answer. To be honest, I wear pretty simple clothes. If I'm out with friends, I wear jeans and a shirt or sweater. And if I'm at work, I wear a pair of work pants. I suppose when it's colder out, I like to wear a cap. But other than that, I keep it pretty simple. Here's the second question. And here's my answer. It depends on what kind of clothes they are. If I'm looking for work clothes, then I'll go to a department store in the city. But if it's for casual clothes, I could buy them anywhere. Department stores, online, or even secondhand shops. I don't have any particular shop that I like. Here's the third question, and here's my response. Oh, I'm not totally sure about that. If traditional means a suit or a dress, then I suppose people wear those when they go to special events like a wedding or church on Sunday. Also, in Canada, there are people from a wide range of cultural backgrounds, so for events like Lunar New Year or Orthodox Easter, you'll sometimes see people dressed more traditionally. And here's the fourth question. And here's my response. Personally, I find I've gotten more interested in clothes as I've gotten older. I have steady work, so I can buy more clothes. When I was younger, I didn't really care as much, but I think people generally are more interested when they're younger. I suppose fashion is more relevant to younger people, though I don't know where they get their money for it all. So that's it for part one. Remember, if you're finding it difficult to think of answers or you're not very confident in your speaking ability, download the free IELTS speaking checklist in the description of this video. It'll show you what you need to do to be properly prepared for test day and to give you some tips to improve your speaking. Let's move on to the second part of IELTS speaking, the 2-minute talk. The 2-minute talk is something you need to practice, even if your English is perfect. What's going to happen is I'm going to give you a task card. You'll have 1 minute to prepare, and then you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Ready? Now, I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you speak, you'll have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say, and you can make some notes if you wish. Do you understand? Please use a pen and paper for your notes, and here's your topic. I'd like you to talk about a book you read recently. I'd like you to now speak for 2 minutes on this topic. You can begin. Okay, how did you go? If you're unsure about how you went or what to do, then I recommend checking out a range of packages on E2 Test Prep. Nearly every E2 package includes a one-on-one speaking mock test with one of our IELTS experts. It's very simple to book and to take. Simply choose a day and time of your choice and click the Zoom link just before the time of your booking. Importantly, you'll receive lots of valuable feedback, so you'll know exactly what to do on test day to get that high score. Get an IELTS test prep package with E2 today. I'll now show you how I would respond on test day. Pay attention to how I extend my ideas and listen carefully to my vocab, pronunciation, grammar, and fluency. A few months ago, I finished reading Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Samin Nosrat. I'd wanted to read it for years, and I found an inexpensive copy at a bookstore, so I snatched it up. It had been recommended in a podcast that I like listening to about experts in their fields. The book is literally about how salt, fat, acid, and heat are the key components of cooking. While the book does have recipes in the end, it's much more interesting how the author goes into detail about these four components. I was particularly amazed by how much detail there was about salt. I used to be a cook, so I would always add salt to my food. I knew that it was a flavor enhancer, but I had no idea how much deeper you could go into it. The main thing was that I learned that if you salt your meat 24 hours before cooking it, the salt can penetrate deeper into the meat, and the meat will retain more moisture, which makes it taste way better. I'd worked as a cook when I was younger, and so I learned to always use salt, but I had no idea what a difference it made. There were a few other notes about salt that I integrated into my life as well. Normally, I don't like cookbooks or TV cooking shows, but I found her approach to teaching, cooking, and even life so interesting. For her, cooking isn't just about the food, it's about the journey, the preparation, the care, the history, and most importantly, it's about sharing the journey. I've actually told so many of my friends about all the cool information I learned from her book. So before we take a more careful look at the transcript, remember to take a look at this video. It's about how to extend your ideas in part 2. You're going to see some of those techniques here. Now, let's look at how I started. A few months ago, I finished reading Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Samin Nosrat. Great. So I introduce with a time intro. Now I'm not thinking about answering the question, I'm just telling a story. Then I immediately add, I'd wanted to read it for years and I found an inexpensive copy at a bookstore, so I snatched it up. So I've used the past perfect. I use it a few times in my response. It's a great way to add background information. That's really where the past perfect shines. Now, when we skip to the end, I say, normally I don't like cookbooks or TV cooking shows, but I just found her approach to teaching cooking and even life so interesting. So I make a point about my normal preferences, which really highlights why this book was special. And there's some great topic-specific vocabulary here as well. Flavor enhancer, penetrate deeper, to salt the meat. I even used salt as a verb. That's topic-specific. Her approach to cooking, plenty of good vocab and some complex grammar. And that's a key point here. Don't try to answer the question. Relax and tell the story. Notice that I quickly answered the first 3 parts of the prompt and then went into rich personal details about why the book was special. That's the ticket to success here. Let the ideas in your mind guide your answers. And if you're worried you couldn't answer this question, here's some advice. Take 10 minutes and write an answer out. I'm constantly surprised how often students say, "Oh, I can't answer this," or "I don't have any ideas." And so I give them a pen and paper and 10 minutes and tell them to write. Suddenly, they've got great stories. Pick the 5 hardest part 2 questions you can find on the internet. Find the tests you hope you never get in the IELTS test and write your answers. You'll be amazed at how much you'll be able to say if you make an effort. Let's move on to the final part of IELTS speaking. This is the discussion. In part 3, you'll have 4 or 5 minutes to answer a few questions on a topic similar to the topic you spoke about in part 2. So because you just spoke about a book you read recently, you'll now have a discussion with the examiner on a range of topics related to reading. This part is a bit more free-flowing. The examiner may even ask a question or two quite spontaneously. This part of the test is very interactive. You'll need to listen carefully and respond appropriately. just like in a real-life discussion or conversation. So I'll ask you a question, you'll respond, and then I'll show you how I would respond to that question on test day. Ready? We've been talking about a book you read recently, and I'd like to ask you one or two more general questions related to this. What are some reasons people don't like reading? Here's the question, and here's my response. I think it's not that they don't like reading. I think it's that most people don't have time. I think people like getting lost in a good book, but life can get pretty busy. That said, I suppose there's so much media available now that people can easily watch series on Netflix or YouTube, and so easily from their phones, which makes it hard to switch off. These days on the train, I constantly see people watching videos on the way home. I guess when you're tired, it's just easy to watch videos. Reading takes a bit more focus. Okay, next question. How can young people be encouraged to read more? Here's the question, and here's my response. There are a few ways. One is to have a teacher or parents who like reading. The more the teacher or parents enjoy reading, the more likely the young people will take on the behavior. You can't just tell kids they should read if you don't read yourself. Another way would be to reward kids for reading. I remember when I was in elementary school, one of my teachers tracked how much we read. And if we read a certain number of books by the end of the term, we'd get a prize. I'm not sure it's the best way, but it could work for kids today. So notice in this answer, I've used the correlative comparative, the more the more. It's a great structure for showing cause and effect, and it's complex grammar. Ready for the next question? Did people read books more in the past than they do now? Here's the question, and here's my response. In the past, I think people definitely read more. I remember years ago, I would see people reading everywhere. On the bus or on their coffee break, people would usually have a book with them. These days, people are usually gazing into their phones, watching videos or replying to chats. To be honest, it's a bit sad. I feel like people are losing their ability to concentrate on reading. Okay, next question. How do people's reading habits change as they get older? Okay, here's the question, and here's my response. I don't think they change. I think people tend to read the same things most of their lives. I mean, I suppose once you finish school, you might not read textbooks anymore, but I think people read what they like to read most of their lives. I know a lot of people who read comic books when they were younger, and they still read them now. And people who are interested in certain topics will continue to read those topics as they get older. It is definitely possible that people will perhaps discover new things as they get older. So, of course, some people might find new things to read. I guess I'm also hopeful that people who didn't read when they were younger might start to do so when they get older. Okay, next question. Is reading a physical book the same as reading an electronic book? Here's the question, and here's my answer. Definitely not. I much prefer physical books. I think most people prefer reading books. If you want to make notes or if you want to go to a specific page quickly, I think it's easier to do this with a physical book. I think electronic books have some usefulness. They're easier to carry and you can fit a lot of books onto an e-reader. And you can even now make notes in them. But I think most people prefer to have that tactile interaction with their books. Okay, final question. In the future, do you think people will read more or less? Here's the question, and here's my response. Sadly, I think they're going to read less. Applications have become so good at grabbing and holding your attention, which is forcing people to stay on their devices. Whether they're watching a video or playing a video game, it's really hard to break the habit. Although I suppose some people are trying to avoid social media and read more, and personally, I know lots of people who read a lot, I think it's going to become less and less common to read books. I'd love to be wrong on this, though. So in this answer, I quickly answer the question, and then I extend using a range of grammatical structures. So that's it. You've just completed a full IELTS speaking test. It will feel as if it went by just like that. The main thing I recommend is to build the habits you need to make sure you get the best possible result on test day, and get feedback from an expert. Remember, if your speaking test is coming up, make sure to download the free IELTS speaking checklist from the description below to check that you're properly prepared for test day. Good luck.